Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is the next installment of the ongoing education series that Cyndicate is creating for businesses, business owners, and not just the membership of Cyndicate, but for a larger distribution. As we have begun here now, we're starting to see more and more people come and join us, and we're bringing a myriad of topics to you from a business perspective, based around IT, business foundations and fundamentals, the actual research. Lynn, welcome to the show. And today we're going to be discussing human resources, HR, human capital, what it means to do the care and feeding of the animals in the zoo that your business represents. Now, whether your business is larger in scale, whether you are an employee, or whether you are a one-person show, having a regular program of taking care of the people, key stakeholders, managers, and leaders of your business is vital. Businesses that succeed and succeed very well are known for taking care of their employees first. In fact, human capital is the one asset in business that consistently grows if it's invested in over time. It is the only asset in a business or in any business at all that will give you a higher rate of return consistently over the length of time that you put it to work than any other process or tool you will put into place inside of your business. So why do businesses spend so little time investing in their people? And often what I will see in my role being exposed to small and medium businesses is the absolute opposite. It's that treating people as expendable or exchangeable inside of businesses, to treat them as appendages or tools, and often to not invest in them with the right outset or the right mindset or plan from the very beginning. So it pays whether, once more, you are one person taking care of yourself. In other words, you are the golden goose of your business, or whether you have dozens or hundreds of people that would rely on you and the success of the business itself based on key employees, key stakeholders, or people that are vital by function, for you to invest in the care and the long-term development and growth. It is a strange comparison to hear business owners talk about not wanting to invest too much in employees or employee development, because if I make them too valuable or too indispensable, they're going to leave. When the absolute investment that we make in people capital inside the business, in other words, investing, doubling down, tripling down, and making sure that employees have everything they need to succeed, often creates the environment where they won't leave. If employees feel challenged, if they feel rewarded, if they feel valuable, and if they feel like they have been heard, those employees in turn will stay and invest long-term. And the amount of return when that kind of people capital is realized, both small and large businesses, expands and can expand exponentially. There's a basic formula in human capital, in the returns for human development when it comes to people and companies growing, that says that if I hire one person to do a job, I'm going to get 1 unit of labor. Now, depending on that employee, that unit of labor, the outcome can be much bigger or much smaller than expected, but that person will be able to, in turn, create 1 unit of labor. And if I hire another employee, that person, in turn, can create another unit of labor. But if I take those two employees and I put them together with the right tools and resources, the outcome from those two people working together becomes 3 units of labor, not 2. If I invest well in 3 employees, that return becomes 5. If I invest well in 5 employees, that return is 8. If I employ and invest in those 8 employees, that return is 13. So a very small company can get an enormous return off of its people capital if they are cared for the right way. Now, for those that are joining that might be solopreneurs or may instead be employees for companies, your own investment in your career development, in other words, the actual technical skills that make you very good at your job, your competencies, in other words, what you're really good at when you wake up in the morning and develop through life, and then your outlook and mindset, in other words, knowing what your expectations are critical. We're going to talk about the most essential parts of human resources today, and that's why we have brought Ashley McCarney on with us. Her company is Involvi Consulting. She is a well-noted human resources consultant working with small, medium, large capital class businesses. She works from full cycle negotiation, onboarding, and offboarding, helping employees realize and grow their potentials, and ultimately showing companies how to invest first in their people and then how to get the most out of that investment for companies so that they can develop and grow. Ashley, welcome. Thank you for coming on, obviously with Cyndicate, to talk about human resources and human capital today. And if you can first give us just a tiny little window into your background, and more importantly, what topics our viewers can expect and what will help them develop their own human capital capacity for their business.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Mitch. I'm really excited to be here. Mitch touched on a number of really fabulous topics with regards to HR and how it's perceived in business and how it's really strengthened and utilized in different businesses. And so I'm just going to share my screen here and we will get going. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So with regards to today's topic, 4 HR tools every business needs for their people, you know, I want to first talk about who is HR. So my background is long-standing HR. I've been in HR for about 15 years, working for a various number of companies, whether it's a sole proprietorship, whether it was a publicly traded organization across North America, very large global retail brands, not-for-profits, and a number of others. Whether I was an employee or a consultant for those organizations, I've been exposed to a number of different employee situations. I'd like to say I've seen it all, but there are still times where it's something new comes across my desk. And I've even dealt with a couple of union organizations, which kind of take this conversation today into a whole other realm. So if you have questions specifically about unions, we will touch on it very briefly in one of the slides, but that's usually a separate conversation. And so today, as Mitch mentioned, I run an organization called Involvy Consulting. We are an HR consulting firm working with small to medium businesses, either A, to be your HR. If you don't have enough work for a full-time HR employee, we can come on board as a managed service provider monthly to operate your HR for you. Alternatively, we can just come in and set up the foundation. So employee documents, policies, procedures, and offer letters. And which we'll talk about later. And then we can also do projects that would add to your current HR complement, be it you have a full HR team and they're all at capacity. We can come in and take on those one-off projects that will help move your team forward. So first, before we go into today's full presentation, I want to talk about who is HR, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there and there's a lot of people that say, oh, HR is just an administrative function. And that's usually because we're not a direct revenue generator. There is no balance sheet to say HR and this many sales. And so very often, and in the past, it's been considered more of an administrative cost function, which hasn't necessarily put HR at the table. It hasn't welcomed it as a strategic partner. But HR is a key partner within the leadership team. And assist with a number of initiatives, essentially anything pertaining to your people or your human capital, as it's now termed. So today we're going to discuss 4 key HR tools for businesses, whether you're a small to medium business or even a large business. Some of these will always pertain to you. And so we'll feel free to jump in if you have questions throughout the presentation, but we'll also leave time at the end for questions. So the first topic we're going to cover is legislation requirements. The second topic is up-to-date employment agreements, offer letters, policies, procedures. Those create a really great foundation for your business. And then keeping a pulse on your culture. Culture is more of that soft skill. It's more of that, how is everybody feeling? How is everybody doing? Are my employees engaged? Are they coming to work for more than just a paycheck? i.e., do they care about our organization and the business that it does and our customers? And then lastly, we're going to talk about strategic planning, contingency planning, and do you have a plan for your human capital? You know, there's a lot of that discussion today with the pandemic, so we're going to touch on that at the end of the conversation. So kicking it off with the basic rules and regulations, you know, legislation requirements are the driving force behind any recommendations or a lot of the recommendations that whether your HR professionals are making, whether you're talking to employment lawyers or you've got an HR consultant in your back pocket. A lot of the base of what they're recommending or suggesting is from these legislation outlines. So the first one is Employment Standards Alberta. I've put a link to that in our chat today, and I will continue to put the links to all of these mentioned websites on the chat as well. And so employment standards provides the minimum standards with which an employee should be treated and what they are entitled to. It covers such areas as vacation, overtime, job protected leave, terminations, stat holidays, etc. And so as a small business or a solo entrepreneur, it's really important that you understand those employment standards because they are the base. And if an employee doesn't feel like they're treated properly or that we're not following the employment standards, they can make a claim and employment standards can come in, they can investigate, and then they can put forward an order that basically says this is what you're required to do. Alberta Human Rights protects Albertans from discrimination in certain areas based on specified grounds. The purpose of the Human Rights Act is to ensure that all Albertans are offered an equal opportunity to earn a living, find a place to live, and enjoy services customarily available to the public without discrimination. And so it's really important to understand those items when it comes to human rights. We're talking about race, religion, sexual orientation, whether you're married or not, where you've come from, where you live. All of those, including others that I didn't mention, are called protected grounds. And so they really mandate what you can and cannot ask in an interview, what you can and cannot talk about really on the employment floor or in the office, and really what we can't discriminate against when we're hiring, when we're making promotion decisions, or when we're making termination or layoff decisions. And so those complaints can go right to the Human Rights Office. And if you are convicted of having a human rights offense, then it is publicly put on their website. And it is public knowledge. So that's something you really want to mitigate your risks with. Next is the CPHR Alberta. This pertains a little less to employment owners and leaders, but very much so to HR professionals, as they are our designate body. So like accountants have CPAs, things like that. CPHR Alberta is our designate body that all certified human resource professionals belong to. They uphold the ethics and professionalism of HR and ensure that they're held accountable to the decisions that they make. They also provide their members with enhanced competencies and capabilities through training and best practices and experiences. So it's a very good designate body for all of us to learn and professionally grow from to provide our employers and our clients the best service. Next is our Occupational Health and Safety Alberta. So OH&S typically is very close with HR in the past in that within the organization, there are, of course, safety is of utmost importance to the employer and to HR. But most recently, in the most recent updates, they've actually taken on the workplace violence and prevention, workplace harassment, violence and prevention section of what used to pertain to HR. So now employers are actually legally obligated to have a harassment and violent prevention policy and an investigation program that's published so that all employees understand the process. And should they feel they're being bullied, harassed, or there is violence in the workplace, this is now an obligation of employers to investigate or have a third party investigate. So if you have questions on that, we can talk about it further. And then, as I said, we're going to touch briefly on collective agreements, which are for unionized environments. So all you have to know is if you're dealing with a unionized environment, or you have a client that's unionized, or you eventually become unionized, the collective agreement is the binding agreement that holds the employer and the union accountable to what the employees are entitled to. And very often the collective agreement will supersede the Employment Standards Act, which we talked about first. So just keep that in mind, that not all the Employment Standards Alberta Act applies to those unionized environments, but there is a lot more details that need to be discussed there. So don't take that word as the beginning and the end of that topic. And so really, when it comes to basic rules and regulations, this ties in very well to the next slide here when it comes to the fundamentals of your organization. And so, a lot of people think, oh, no big deal, policies, procedures. I trust my employees. I've hired them all. I'm the owner of the company, and it's just kind of grown organically. And I trust everybody. We all know what we're doing. But there comes that point where you realize that your business is growing faster than you recognize. You're hiring more employees. And there are some employees that aren't being held to the same expectation, or that aren't performing, or that don't know how to expense something, or that misuse company resources. And so a good foundation of policies and procedures is really key in 95% of organizations. The smallest organization that I've created this program for is 3 people. And so if you're on this call and you're thinking, oh God, I have, 3 people or more, this is definitely something that you should think about having if you don't have it already. And it's important to keep it updated. So when we talk about employment agreements and offer letters, there's a different distinction between those two. So an offer letter is typically, it's short, it's sweet, it's positive, it's welcoming, it has salary, vacation, benefits, and maybe some termination clauses within it, as well as a detailed job description. Basically introduces the employee to the job that they're being offered and provides very high level information that they're interested in. Oh, my apologies. It changed slides there. And so that's really important. Whereas the employment agreement is really important because it goes through those important top level details, but it also incorporates policies, procedures, expectations. And so while an offer letter can be maybe 2-3 pages long, the employment agreement can be up to 10, 11 pages long, depending on how you format it for your organization. And so in addition to an offer letter and or employment agreement, we talked about policies and procedures. You can wrap that up all in an employee handbook, or if it works better for you, you can have standalone policies. Further to what I said earlier, it is important for that workplace violence and prevention, workplace harassment, violence and prevention policy, as well as a few others that are mandated by the governing bodies we talked about earlier, that they have standalone policies within your organization. So just make sure that you're double checking with somebody, or we can help you out with that and what that means in terms of expectations and requirements. Operational policies are also really relevant to employees. So we talk about expense policies, vehicle use policies, health and safety policies, etc. So it may not be everything pertaining to their employment relationship with regards to their relationship with their job, but these are also expectations that are put on them as the employee to uphold the brand, uphold the company messaging, and uphold the company expectations with regards to P&L budgets and costs and things like that. Next on our list, we're talking about culture. So culture can be enhanced. Culture can be enhanced or eroded by a number of factors. Some of them you'll be aware of, others are hidden until it becomes a problem. And as I said earlier, culture can be either that touchy-feely, how is everybody feeling, do you enjoy coming to work piece, or it can actually be tracked by statistics, which we'll talk about on the next slide. So in order to understand your culture, be proactive and keep a pulse on it. So communicate to your staff transparently as often as possible. If they get the sense that you're, as the leader, are hidden in your office and making all these decisions and they don't know how they're contributing to the larger picture, that could create perception, and perception is reality unless we communicate it otherwise. Be aware of your social cues and active listening as a leader, whether this is to your clients or to your employees. It exudes what you feel as your organization's culture is and how you want to operate. So that's really key. Be consistent with your employees. They talk, even if you've asked them not to. We all have confidentiality clauses. We all have don't talk about your wage because it's confidential between you and the employer, but they do talk. And we have to assume that every decision we make, they will talk, even if we've asked them to be quiet. So make sure that behind the scenes you're as consistent as possible. Be supportive and also gain trust with your employees. I've put here, have a few thermometers. I didn't want to use the word informants because there's such a negative tone there with the word informant. But it's important as a leader to have a few trusted people within the organization that can come and knock on your door and say, we've got an issue, or there's a little unhappy group over here, or the pulse of the organization is very negative. So have those people in your back pocket and listen to them and be open to hearing what they have to say. Further to that, here are some tools that will help gauge your culture more quantitatively than qualitatively. So you can calculate your turnover stats by looking at how many employees you have compared to last year and how many you've lost. You can conduct exit interviews. This is something I would recommend being done by your HR professional or a third-party consultant, just because of the nature of information that you're going to be receiving back. But look at your exit interview feedback. Understand why people are leaving. Look at your absenteeism stats. That can be a direct correlation to culture. Yes, people are absent for valid reasons a lot of the time, but if they're taking all of their sick time at the beginning of the year, or they're taking every Friday and Monday off, or if they're taking the opposite day of a long weekend to extend it all the time, then they don't really have a lot of that engagement for their organization. Look at performance metrics, employee referral stats. So how do your employees refer people to work there? And if there's no employee referrals coming your way and you have open job postings, then ask why. Why are people not wanting to refer people to work here? Do engagement surveys. That's something that we definitely offer with our services here at Involvy Consulting. We also offer pulse surveys. Those are more short and concise throughout the year, as opposed to engagement surveys that are done once or twice, once every 1 or 2 years. And then we also have 360-degree reviews. So ask, if you want a review done on yourself to see how you're doing, you'd ask some clients to partake, you'd ask your employees to partake, and then you'd ask some direct reports to partake, and you'll get a really clear, consistent view of your performance and how you're doing at the organization. Some tools to help your culture and improve it if you find that there are some gaps. Open communication in town halls. Again, communicate to your staff as openly and transparently as possible. Ask for feedback, listen, and respond. Development plans and succession. Work with your employees to see how they can grow and engage them in the business. Lunch and learns, team building events if the budgets allow for it. There's also a lot of really cheap ways to do team building events. And comprehensive total compensation package. And so while this usually comes with a cost associated, it's really important to know that you have the key things that matter to the employees covered if you're going to be spending the money. So look at your benefits, your vacation, your paid time off, the flexibility, and right now is very important is virtual work arrangements and how are we supporting our employees. The next piece is our planning piece. So really important to understand your strategic planning and your contingency planning. Do you have a plan for your human capital? Really important to understand what's going to happen in the wake of a pandemic, in the wake of COVID, and how are we going to have a business continuity plan. So when we talk about strategic planning, first of all, strategic planning is looking at your business and looking at 1, 2, 3, even 5 years out. Where do you want to be? What are some of your key metrics that you want to make sure that you have in place? What are some of the goals that you want to achieve? And then communicate that to your staff. That will engage them with the culture piece. It will also provide them a purpose for what they're doing in their daily work and how it contributes to the larger business. It will also create a really clear path for you, how you're going to spend your money, what you're going to invest in, and where you're going to allocate dollars to. In terms of emergency planning, this is really important when it comes to health and safety. We talk about fire evacuation. What happens in the event of a fire? What happens in the event of a data breach? Our IT team talked about that yesterday. Really important to have these safeguards in place so that your organization is protected and your employees know how it's protected so that they know what to do in the event of an emergency. And then this business continuity planning has become much more prevalent in the last few weeks than it ever has been before. But really talking about in the event of an emergency that happens, how are we going to handle this? How are we going to continue our daily business operations? I've got one previous client of mine that set up drop sites all around Edmonton in the event of COVID becoming what it is today, so that there's documents all around Edmonton in different places that employees can go, access one-on-one so that they can still self-distance and social isolate, but, that the resources are there for them to continue their business. So people are essential, and are they in your plan? How does this affect the people more than the technology and the business and the documentation of your business? What are your people going to be held accountable to? So when we talk about planning, some best practices for your plans, don't just have a plan for the sake of having a plan. Make sure you understand it. Make sure you're, as the leaders, are bought into it and that you've communicated it to your staff. Have an external consultant lead the project. And this is really key for small to medium businesses. Larger businesses will probably have somebody on staff dedicated to this. But for a small to medium business, you guys are running day in, day out, managing the business, operating the business, meeting with your clients, doing business development. And so sometimes these plans are done on the side of a desk and they don't really get the care and attention that they need, or they take way too long to complete and implement. And so if you have an external consultant available to take on that task, it will save you time and money for sure. Assign key people internally to be on the planning committee. You want to make sure that you've assigned key people that are in charge of different areas to provide input to this plan, so that not only do you get their buy-in, but that you don't miss any crucial steps. Review the plan against your business needs. Review the plan annually with someone designated to update it when needed. So if something happens and you need to, adjust the plan, or you've got a staff phone list as part of one of your plans and somebody leaves, have somebody there that can update it as needed on an ongoing basis, instead of doing that once a year. And then again, review it annually. Make sure that if new legislation comes up, or new requirements come up, or your business has fundamentally changed, that your plans evolve with your business. And last but not least, hold people accountable to their deliverables. Make sure that if you've assigned something to somebody, that you've got the abilities to say, okay, hey, Sally, did you end up completing this? Or Joe, hey, can you help with this, and make sure that it's done? And where are we with this? Otherwise, again, it will be on the side of your desk, and you'll get to it when you get to it, and things will start slipping through the cracks. And then you'll also potentially lose engagement of your employees when it comes to planning and getting the plans implemented. So in summary, and I realize that we're a little early on time, Mitch, but key HR tools for the business that we've covered are legislation requirements. Make sure you have up-to-date employment agreements, offer letters, including any related policies and procedures, so that you have a good foundation for your business. Keeping a pulse on your culture and understanding where your employees are at, and how you can make the environment potentially more positive or more inclusive. And then really make sure you've got strategic planning on board, you've got contingency planning on board, and you know how to maintain your business through all of this, because that will tie into everything else with regards to policies and procedures. So thank you so much, guys. Here's my contact details. If you have any questions or need to reach out, we'd love to help you with any needs that you have for your business. And if we don't have the expertise on hand, we have consultants in our network that will definitely be able to help you out.
Ashley, we had one question from Michael already right now, and then just some commentary to bring in us. Wanted to know, how do you manage surveys and stats in the case of a small organization where there's really nothing anonymous? And what I said to him was that there are a couple of strategies and even tools that we can use.
Yeah, sorry, Mitch, you broke up there, and I'm just going to come off the chat and see if I can see it. How do you manage surveys and stats in the case of a small organization? So yeah, really good question, Michael. It is tougher. And usually in a larger organization, if there's a department of 6 or less people, all of those departments together get lumped together to provide those statistics so that it continues to be anonymous. But in that organization, when you're just small and you want to create that anonymity, having a third-party consultant send out the survey information, have them analyze the survey data, and then just send the executives or the owner an executive summary of what was said, I think is the best way. It's really important when you're doing an engagement survey or a pulse survey to let the respondents know that the multiple choice or the question responses will be anonymous, but the text, if there's any text boxes or comment boxes, that those will be provided back to leadership verbatim. In a sense that will let them know that, hey, if I put Ashley is very unhappy with leadership, that verbatim will go to leadership. So that would encourage them to disguise what they're writing and still get their point across. But I hope that answers your question.
Michael, thoughts?
Yeah, I've got a small organization, so I interact with everybody on a daily basis. Yeah. And I've been fortunate that I've got a very good team, and so I try once a month, except for last month and this month, unfortunately, to go for team lunches to chat and just kind of go over stuff, and just as a way to not be in a formal setting. And I've found a lot of success with that. But I definitely want to be proactive about interacting with my staff to make sure that they're being taken care of, that they're happy, that I don't get blindsided by a resignation letter and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that was where my question was, just how do it's always easy to ask the question, I find. It's really getting them to actually answer it, which is, I find, the problem for a lot of things. Is it's always easier to ask the question than actually get honest answers. So
Yeah, and another solution to that, Michael, is, I mean, it sounds like you've got some great engagement things going on where you're in touch with your staff, but again, you don't know what's underneath the covers, right? So having a consultant or a third-party individual like myself on call is a really good way of communicating to your employees, hey, you know, while I understand I'm the owner of the business, there are certain situations that you may not want to talk to me about. So here is our HR representative for you to reach out confidentially if you want to talk, if you've got issues. And you can extend that to, you know, do you have issues at home? It kind of like an employee family assistance program, but without the certifications of like a psychologist or anything.
Yeah.
And that will allow them a vehicle to have those conversations. And then, you know, we could just communicate that, you know, should it be work related, that a summary of concerns will be provided to the ownership group monthly or something, so that you get some feedback, but it may not be direct from the employee.
If I could, with what
That's
Ashley's
really good.
saying as well, Michael, and in relation for you and your smaller business, this is also a time and opportunity through, let's say, outside consulting and helper assistance, or through education services, seminars, et cetera, to add some new essential tools in your data, in your toolbox, if you will. Our ability to solicit feedback is usually grounded on how comfortable we are asking people questions. And from a human capital or HR realm, we have to develop a different skill set, a different way of engaging with people. And sometimes that means changing the way we might have one-to-one meetings, have sessions, look for feedback and solicit feedback from people, which means that we will more often than not, be asking questions in the right space, right time, more frequently, holding one-to-one meetings more frequently itself. And then by changing the format, the methodology, we often get to the heart of the matter, or what the actual issues are. A lot of people will be very conflicted between other people, point to other things. So-and-so did this, and I didn't like it, or we didn't succeed because of this reason, or this didn't work because of that, or I didn't have the right resources and tools, when perhaps people were really uncomfortable and didn't feel that they were in a spot or confident enough in their ability to do the job in the first place. And that's really a fairly vague, you know, broad example. But if we change some of our own tool set and look at some of these different outside resources, are going to help us collect, analyze, and disseminate that information, and give us a much better direct and technical answer. But that also means that from a human capital standpoint, at the very beginning where I said, sometimes we want to look at investing in ourselves, that means that we develop a new set of skills and tools. And then when we use Ashley's services, that helps us to get much quicker to what the problem or challenges that we're meeting. And then how we're able to recover, bounce back, or respond to it becomes far better polished, and in turn has a far bigger result on business. Helpful?
Makes sense.
Okay. We also have Shane. As a startup, is there a package available to set things up in an ideal scenario for our business design and needs? Essentially, here's what you need to succeed with HR, or like a starter HR toolbox.
Yeah, for sure. So this is one of the services that I offer for those organizations that don't need HR support, but they want that foundation of policies and procedures and things to set it up really nicely. I'll customize a package for any company that needs it, and the prices would vary depending on company size and number of resources needed. But that is definitely something that I offer.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Shane, was there a technical part to that question as well, or just base information?
Just base information. Document storage and everything else like that is all something I can take care of. It's more making sure we had the right policies and procedures in place as we decide to grow our business and stuff like that. So. Okay,
awesome. Thoughts or ideas from the rest of the... Sorry, go ahead.
From a technical perspective, kind of building off of what Shane said, you'd mentioned like employee handbook and policies and procedures and all that kind of stuff. From a simplified standpoint, I guess, like what size would that sort of look like? Like I'm familiar with how safety policies and procedures work. We're a core certified company. Even whether I was 2 people or 20 people, my core manual just to meet legislation-based requirements is like 150 pages. Like there's no way around that just because of what needs to be in there.
Yeah.
From a HR perspective, in order to make something obviously not 100% like what like Stantec or PCL or somebody like that would have, but to cover your bases like you were talking about, like what would that what could we anticipate that being in terms of the number of policies and procedures that we would be needing to implement, and then obviously monitor and update potentially and whatnot? Like, how big would a good starter package be?
Yeah, so I think it depends on a case-by-case scenario with regards to what you're looking for as a business owner. But when it comes to the basics, either an employment agreement, that may just suffice in terms of having just brief highlights of things like vehicle use, expenses, harassment, drug and alcohol. I had one client the other day that wanted a firearm clause put in their policies, and I went, huh? And he lives in the States, and I tried to explain firearms in Canada. He says, well, when I lived in Canada, you know, somebody brought a firearm to work. And I went, okay, then we'll put it in the policy. You know, so it just depends on your individual scenario and what you're looking for. But the long and the short of it, I would probably say the minimum requirement is either an offer letter or an employment agreement. And then your drug and alcohol policy, being that, you know, that's prevalent, and especially because cannabis is now legal, that's kind of ties into that core audit, occupational health and safety piece, but falls more in HR. I would definitely have the workplace harassment and violence protection policy as a standalone that gets reviewed every year along with your program regarding that, if it's not already in your core package. And then realistically, it's just a brief set of expectations in terms of what do you expect your employees to operate by? What do you intend them to speak about your brand? Like, do we want to hold them accountable to social media posts and talking about the brand? You want them to represent it in a good way. All of those touchy feels that, you know, you can look at an employee and say, no, I didn't like the way that you handled that, or no, I expect you to do it this way. The other really key thing with all of this that I haven't mentioned is performance discipline and performance management. You know, it encompasses that. It's within that culture piece and holding people accountable to the jobs that they've been hired to do. Because if you let accountability run ragged, or you're not comfortable having difficult conversations, that can be, I don't want to say the demise of your business, but it could potentially be the demise of your business depending on how big the snowball gets. And so having the skills to have those difficult conversations, having the policies to back it up, really will help you navigate your business too. And again, we can help with all of that. But the short answer to your question, Michael, is I'd say 3 or 4 different documents and expand it from there.
Ashley, may I add to that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. To help as well, Michael, the smaller the business, the more these documents tend to bleed together. Like in many instances, the larger the organization, your call it your standard operating procedures will be separate, or there'll be your operations manual. Then there'll be human resources or human capital manual, which will govern everything to do with the people. And then there'll be safety and safety policy and procedures. So the smaller the business, the more this tends to blend together. But what you're looking for from a documentation standpoint has a few characteristics. There is the overall internal operating policies and procedures for your business. There would be the standard operating procedures, in other words, the way business is transacted by itself. And then there's any legislation that is governed by any portion of the business that you're in. So as long as your employees will have access to that information, and that can be digital documents, paper-based documents, that can be as small or as simple if you're looking to really downsize the amount you're going. My manual is 150 pages in size. If you have links to external resources like legislation mandates through Alberta, for example, or Government of Canada, or for your own legislative or governing bodies in charge of aspects of your industry or certain roles, you know, if you're employing welders, scaffolders, if you're employing surgeons, if you're employing nurses, whatever it is, that portions of the legislation, standard operating procedures, or internal policies that you have, meaning that my people can or can't talk about this, or can or can't do this, or can or can't wear this, for example, that needs to be specified. But otherwise, that outside legislation we can have attached in the form of links, identifiers going out to outside bodies, et cetera. So that could cut down the size of your document if you're really worried about that. And then when employees come in dependent on roles given time, you can have your company specifying or specializing, call it the employee handbook as opposed to the master employee handbook, which shows the pertinent parts towards their role, where they can find extra information should they have questions or comments. And then to Ashley's comment, when it comes to employee discipline, performance, et cetera, whatever we also don't state from a human resources policy perspective, we cannot directly interact with our employees unless we have it specified in the form of a policy, procedure, legislation, et cetera. So if we have certain behaviors, characteristics, or expectations, we don't have it in writing, we can't be punitive with our employees. In other words, we can't discipline them for something that we haven't bothered to tell them is the way that we expect them to do that too. So that can make a document bigger or smaller, but there are ways to condense that by taking those universals, legislation, legality, industry-related material, and making sure those resources are in a spot where everybody has access. In other words, Alberta labor standards, et cetera, human rights policies and stuff like that, and excise that in favor of links and stuff like that. So people are welcome to it, they have access to it, but otherwise we don't need to take up the space to occupy that when they can find it very easily. And
Michael, in addition to what Mitch is saying, that's again also really important because legislation is changing all the time. And if you don't have an HR team that's on the pulse of what's going on, and Alberta, employment standards changes their legislation all of a sudden, if you have it written out in your document, you're going to have to take time and go and update that in order to continue holding people accountable to the proper things. Whereas if you just have the link in your document, people are responsible to going to the most updated information. And then further again to what Mitch was saying, having that concise document for a small organization where things bleed together, that's typically where I would see an employment agreement coming into play when you hire somebody, because it covers a lot of those things and it may negate needing the employee handbook right away. So there are options there if you want to minimize the amount of documentation that you have, but still protect yourself.
Yeah, no, but I wasn't so concerned about like how many documents. I just off the top of my head, I don't know like I don't even fathom what it would look like. Like, if it should be 6 documents or 60 documents. Like I was just trying to get an idea of like what that ballpark kind of should be as to like, what would be a reasonable package.
Yeah, a small to medium business, I'd say we could do it in 5 documents and under.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Comments, thoughts, questions? Human resources is both scary and big and tiny and small, depending on what you need to do. The less of you there are, the less you need to take care of. The more of you there are, the more you must mitigate and plan. Human resources in many extents to start with is not any different than safety, which is we are looking to mitigate risk. We're looking to reduce risk, reduce liability, and make sure that we take care of the welfare and the safety of our employees. That's why safety and human resources goes hand in hand. Now, where human resources or human capital comes in other words, performance, maximizing people, that's where good HR or competent HR compared to great HR really differentiates. Great HR, human capital, and I'll use that term interchangeably, really just means maximizing the people in your business. Operating policies and procedures talks about the way stuff works. Operating manuals talks about how tools work. Legislation talks about the legality of the way we must govern ourselves or operate our businesses, et cetera. And then there's those parts where it comes down to employee behavior. HR helps to navigate that. Human resources helps to navigate through those bits and pieces. And having access to those resources and that information is a technical skill. It is a thing that chances are, whether you're, again, solopreneur, few employees, many employees, either don't know, don't want to know, but must be aware of and must be conscientious about. So you either need to take the time to invest in learning that technical skill or finding a partner that helps you to leverage and maximize that, or takes the unknown away so that you can do what is necessary, which is the operation of your business. But HR is an essential function, and it must be something that you at least pay attention to critically and either find the resources and help or learn the practice yourself. Ashley, unless we have other questions, final thoughts. What should people start with? Where should they find certain resources? And what is the best way for them to invoke, or how do you most frequently help your clients?
So I'll go in backwards order. So I most frequently help my clients mitigate their risk, close any gaps that they have within their organization and how they deal with their employees, or what their employees understand they're accountable to as an employee of the organization, in a number of different ways. I think in this conversation, we've talked a lot about HR helping mitigate risk and HR getting you out of hot water and HR holding people accountable. And I think that shines a lot of the negative HR on the business, but it's really required, right? And when we talk about the positive things of HR, because when I was an HR full-time for an organization, I hated the, oh, I got called to the HR office, am I being fired comment. And that was constant. And it kind of goes with the sense that I'm going to get called to the HR office and I'm going to be fired or I'm in trouble. And we have to get away from that scenario, because HR is there to help. HR is there to improve the business and work with the leadership team to rise up and offer the employees a really stellar culture that they don't want to leave and that they're going to recommend to their friends. So you want to be an employer of choice, and you want to have a positive brand within the community, and word of mouth is key. You know, I could talk about terminations and processes for terminations, because onboarding, the way we bring people on, is as important as the way we offboard employees or terminate employees. And so that's a whole other conversation, but your brand and everything is critical to the work of HR. So that's kind of where we help them. And in terms of what we offer, I would say the basics when you're looking at your business is, if you look around and say, okay, yeah, I have a few employees, I sent them an email with their offer letter, and you know, I'm not quite sure where to go. Then further to Michael's question, further to Jeff's question today, further to Mitch's comments, you know, reach out and at least have a conversation with me or somebody in your trusted network to say, what should I do? Those conversations are free. Those conversations are very informative, and it'll at least make you aware of any major risks that you're open to, according to the legislation that is provided, because there could be fines, there could be jail time. I mean, there could be some serious consequences for not understanding your risk. And they don't accept the, well, I didn't know comment. So be informed, stay ahead of your business, and use HR as a resource. I think that answers all your questions, Mitch.
It does.
Okay, great.
Final thoughts from our audience today?
This is Shane. I found that quite informative. Thank you. As a startup business, I wanted to make sure that, you know, I was listening in on this conversation, or on this presentation rather, so that I understand from, as an owner perspective, what my potential liabilities are, from, at least from a high level anyways. And so thank you for this presentation, Ashley. It's been quite informative.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, fantastic. Thank you for joining us today. Of course, coming up over the next week or two, this webinar will be available for digital distribution as well, so you'll be able to review it and come back to it at any time, and also through the Cyndicate network as well. So for those guests that came and joined us, or for those that are member of the tribe, as we like to call them, we're going to be bringing Ashley back on a regular basis to answer questions, go through these webinars, and also make this part of the digital library for education that is free to the business marketplace and to business at large as well. So if you have questions or comments, do not hesitate to reach out to Ashley or myself. You can find us through the Cyndicate organization itself, through Ashley's information, of course, on her splash screen. And we look forward to seeing you on our next Cyndicate webinar through this Cyndicate Talks. Ashley, thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise today. For everybody else, and for those that are watching this in the future, do not hesitate to reach out, because education is free, and it is up to you to make sure that you are maximizing it for yourself as a business owner. Have a wonderful day and a great afternoon. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mitch. Thanks, everybody.